They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine came with a side of irony and a $180 million receipt. Victoria Whitmore smirked as she pressed a country club job flyer into my hand at my own engagement party, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. $18 an hour, Maya. It's not much, but at least you'd finally contribute to the household instead of being dead weight. Around us, her friends tittered behind champagne flutes, their eyes gleaming with the cruel satisfaction of watching someone be put in their place. What Victoria didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my phone was vibrating in my clutch at that exact moment. The final digital signature, the escrow clearance. By tomorrow morning, when Bloomberg broke the news, this family would discover that the desperate tech startup her husband had dismissed as garbage was being acquired for $180 million. And the CEO they'd been mocking for 2 years? She was standing right in front of them, wearing a thrift store dress and a smile that would soon become their nightmare. My name is Maya Brooks, and this is the story of how I became the boss of the people who treated me like I was nothing. But to understand how deeply satisfying my revenge would be, you need to know where it all started. The gravel crunched under my tires as I steered my 10-year-old Honda Civic up the winding driveway of the Whitmore estate. It was a humid Chicago evening in late July, the kind where the air sits heavy on your skin and makes you feel like you're moving through water. Through my windshield, the house loomed ahead, a Georgian revival monstrosity that screamed old money so loudly it could probably be heard in the suburbs I'd grown up in. I parked around back, waving off the valet who approached with a mixture of confusion and barely concealed pity. The young man, couldn't have been more than 22, looked at my car the way you'd look at a rescue dog with mange, sympathetic but relieved it wasn't his problem. "I've got it, thanks," I said, offering him a smile that he didn't return. He nodded and retreated, probably to tell the other staff about the sad Honda that had dared to approach the estate. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, the leather worn smooth where my palms had rested during countless 4 a.m. panic attacks. This car had seen more of my real life than anyone waiting inside that house. It had been my office, my sanctuary, my witness. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, the black silk slip dress I'd found at a consignment shop draped perfectly. Simple, elegant, timeless. But I knew that to the trained eyes waiting inside, it would register as lacking. No Chanel label, no Dior tag, just good fabric and good lines, which in their world meant nothing. Taking a breath of the thick summer air, I grabbed my clutch, a small black thing I'd owned for 6 years, and stepped out of the car. The humidity hit me immediately, making my carefully straightened hair begin its inevitable return to its natural wave. Another mark against me, I was sure. Patricia Whitmore's hair never moved, preserved in perpetuity by expensive products and the force of sheer willpower. The back entrance led through a side door that opened into a hallway lined with family portraits, Whitmores going back 5 generations, all with the same thin lips and judgmental eyes. I could hear the party from here, the clink of crystal, the low hum of wealthy laughter, the kind of sounds that suggested everyone was having a polite, approved amount of fun. I smoothed down my dress one more time and walked toward the noise. The foyer opened into a massive living room where at least 50 people milled about, holding drinks that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Everything was cream and gold, the walls, the furniture, the people. I felt like a smudge of charcoal on an expensive canvas. "Maya, you made it!" The voice came from across the room, and I didn't need to turn to know it was Victoria. Everyone called her Tori, but I'd never felt comfortable enough to use the nickname. She materialized beside me with the supernatural speed of someone who'd been watching the door, waiting. Victoria Whitmore Hayes was 35, but dressed like she was 25, perpetually chasing a youth that had already left her behind. Tonight, she wore a dress with a plunging neckline that cost more than my car's blue book value, her blonde hair extensions cascading over her shoulders in waves that had definitely been professionally styled that afternoon. "Hello, Victoria," I said, keeping my voice even. "The house looks lovely." "Oh, this?" She waved her champagne flute dismissively. "Mom just threw this together. You know how she is. Everything has to be perfect." Her eyes did a quick sweep of my outfit, and I saw the calculation happen in real time. Vintage, affordable, beneath us. We were worried you got lost, or that your car broke down. Again. The last time my car had broken down was 3 years ago, and Victoria had somehow never forgotten it. Never mind that I'd been 27 and still building my business from nothing. Never mind that I'd fixed it myself in an AutoZone parking lot using a YouTube tutorial. To her, it was permanent evidence of my unsuitability. The valet directed me to the side lot. I lied smoothly, sparing Ethan the embarrassment of having his fiancé's car visible from the main driveway. Victoria laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of knives. Well, at least you're here now. Come on, you need to make the rounds. Though I should warn you. She leaned in conspiratorially, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something floral and overpowering. Todd is holding court about the market again. You might want to nod and smile. He gets testy when people question him. Todd, Brandon Hayes, Victoria's husband, vice president at Axiom Group, a man who had never met a sentence he couldn't make about himself. I'd been avoiding him for the entire 2 years Ethan and I had been together, but I knew tonight I wouldn't be able to. I'll try to keep my opinions to myself, I said, and Victoria patted my arm like I was a dog who'd just learned not to pee on the carpet. She steered me into the crowd, and I scanned the room for Ethan. I found him near the marble fireplace, holding a tumbler of scotch and laughing at something his father was saying. He looked handsome in his navy suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, his posture relaxed in a way it never was when we were alone. This was his natural habitat. These were his people. He caught my eye and offered a smile, tight, nervous, apologetic, but he didn't come over. He stayed anchored to his father's side, safe in the masculine corner of the room where nobody would ask him to defend me. That small non-action hurt more than I wanted to admit. Is that tap water you're drinking? I turned to find Patricia Whitmore standing beside me, her presence announced by the subtle scent of Chanel number 5 and disapproval. Ethan's mother was 58 but looked 10 years younger, preserved by money and a commitment to Pilates that bordered on religious. She was wearing a cream silk pantsuit that probably cost $5,000, and her hair was set in the kind of style that suggested she had a standing weekly appointment. Just staying hydrated, I said, holding up my glass of sparkling water with lime. How practical. The word hung in the air like an insult. Patricia's gaze swept over me with the efficiency of a TSA scanner, cataloging every flaw. That's a lovely dress. Vintage? Yes, I said, because there was no point lying. I found it at a consignment shop in Wicker Park. How thrifty. Another loaded word. You know, dear, if you need help with your wardrobe for these events, I'd be happy to take you shopping. We can't have you looking like... She trailed off, letting me fill in the blank. Like you don't belong, like you're poor, like you're beneath us. That's very kind, I said, the words tasting like ash. But I'm fine. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course you are. She glanced across the room at Ethan. He looks happy, doesn't he? My son. He's worked so hard to get where he is. Partnership track at the firm, family trust, all these responsibilities. It's important that he has support. The right kind of support. The implication was clear. I was not the right kind of support. Before I could respond, my clutch vibrated against my hip. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. My heart rate spiked immediately. That pattern, it was the burner phone, the one that only 3 people in the world had the number to. My co-founder David, my lead engineer Rachel, and Silas Cooper, the lead counsel for the acquisition deal. It was 7 p.m. in Chicago, which meant it was closing time on the West Coast. If this phone was ringing, if Silas was calling right now, it meant one thing. Escrow had cleared. 5 years of work. 5 years of eating instant ramen in a freezing garage. 5 years of being told that I couldn't disrupt the cold chain logistics industry. 5 years of coding until my eyes bled and my fingers cramped and I forgot what sleep felt like. It was done. Excuse me, I said to Patricia, my voice coming from somewhere far away. I need to take this. I turned toward the terrace doors, but Victoria's voice stopped me. Who's calling you now? She'd appeared again, materializing like a bad penny. Her eyes were slightly unfocused. She was on her third glass of champagne, maybe fourth. Don't tell me, a client who needs their printer fixed? It's important, I said, trying to move past her, but she was faster. With the reflexes of someone who'd spent her entire life getting her way, Victoria reached out and snatched the phone from my hand. Victoria! I started, my voice rising for the first time all evening. Oh, relax, she laughed, holding the phone out of my reach like a schoolyard bully. She looked at the screen. Unknown caller. No name. See? Just a number. Who calls at 7:30 on a Friday? She turned to the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by the drama. We all know who calls at this hour, right? Someone tittered. Someone else murmured something I couldn't quite hear. Victoria's smile sharpened. Bill collectors. She said it loudly, clearly, making sure everyone could hear. It's probably a final notice. Does Ethan know about your credit score, Maya? Or is that another little secret? The room rippled with laughter. Not loud, not cruel. Just the polite amusement of people who were grateful they weren't the ones being humiliated. Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, Victoria pressed the side button. The call rejected. She tossed the phone back at me carelessly, and I fumbled to catch it before it hit the marble floor. No phones at the party, Victoria declared, looking triumphant. It's rude. We're here to celebrate family, not deal with your financial situations. I stood there, gripping the phone, my knuckles white. The call had been rejected. Silas would think I was busy. He would wait. The deal was done regardless. The contracts were signed, the money was moving through the system like blood through arteries. Victoria's petty cruelty couldn't stop that, but the disrespect burned through my veins like acid. I looked across the room at Ethan. He was staring into his scotch, pretending to be fascinated by the ice cubes. He had seen the whole thing. He had watched his sister humiliate me, had heard her mock me in front of his family and friends, and he was choosing to do nothing. He was letting this happen. Something inside me, something that had been bending for 2 years, accommodating, compromising, shrinking, finally snapped. Not visibly. I didn't scream. I didn't slap her. I didn't throw my drink in her face, though God knows I wanted to. Instead, I simply nodded. A slow, dangerous movement that they all mistook for submission. You're right, Victoria, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. Family is important. I slipped the phone back into my clutch. I didn't need to answer the call to know what Silas would have said. The deal was closed. The wire transfer of $180 million was already moving through the banking system, immune to Victoria's opinions about my worth. It was real, it was immutable, and in less than 12 hours it would be public. Good, Victoria said, satisfied that she'd tamed the wild animal. Now come on, Todd is about to tell us about his big acquisition strategy. You might learn something. She grabbed my elbow, her nails digging in slightly, and steered me toward a circle of men gathered near the bar. I let myself be led, my mind already miles away, calculating. By tomorrow morning, everything would change. By tomorrow morning, Victoria would understand exactly what she'd done, but tonight I would let them have their fun. Tonight I would smile and nod and play the role they'd cast me in, the struggling freelancer, the gold digger, the burden. Tomorrow, they would learn the truth, and I would watch their world collapse. Brandon Todd Hayes stood at the center of the group like a sun that other planets were obligated to orbit. He was 37, tall, with the kind of build that suggested he'd played football in college and still thought about it every day. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, the universal signal of a man about to share unsolicited wisdom. So the board is freaking out, he was saying, gesturing with a cigar he wasn't allowed to light inside. They're saying we need to pivot to AI, we need to automate, but there's nothing out there worth buying. It's all smoke and mirrors. I heard Axiom was looking at a major acquisition, one of the older men said, Gerald something, a friend of Robert's who made his money in real estate. Todd laughed, a sound like a bark. We're always looking, but these startups, Jesus, they're trash. Run by kids in hoodies who think an algorithm can replace 100 years of infrastructure. He took a sip of his bourbon, savoring both the alcohol and his own expertise. We're looking at one company right now, some outfit called Data Flow Systems. My breath hitched. I stood very still, my fingers wrapped around my water glass so tightly I was surprised it didn't shatter. Heard of them? Gerald asked. Todd shrugged. I haven't read the full dossier yet. It's sitting on my desk, probably collecting dust. But from what I've heard, garbage. The CEO is probably some desperate nerd praying for a buyout so they can pay off their student loans. He grinned, pleased with himself. We're going to lowball them. I told the M&A team, don't offer them a dime over $20 million, and that's generous. We'll strip that company for parts and absorb the tech for pennies on the dollar. I listened to him. Every word, every dismissive laugh, every assumption about the desperate nerd who ran my company. He didn't know. Todd didn't know that the full dossier on his desk included a counteroffer that had been accepted 3 days ago. He didn't know that while he was playing golf and smoking cigars, his CEO had been begging me to sell. He didn't know that the pennies on the dollar he was joking about was actually a cash offer of $180 million that his company had agreed to pay because they knew that without my code, Axiom would be obsolete within 5 years. And most deliciously, he didn't know that the desperate nerd CEO he was mocking was standing 3 feet away from him wearing a dress his wife had mentally classified as thrift store chic. Todd is so smart, Victoria whispered in my ear, her voice honey sweet and poisonous. Maybe if you listen, you'll learn something about how real business works. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Victoria Whitmore Hayes, who had never worked a day in her life, who had married for money and considered it an accomplishment, who spent her afternoons shopping and her evenings judging people she deemed beneath her. A smile touched my lips. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the cage door has been left open. I'm sure I will, I said softly. My clutch vibrated once more. A text message this time. I didn't need to look at it to know what it said. The wire was confirmed. The money was in the offshore trust I'd set up weeks ago, structured specifically to shield it from any future marital assets. I wasn't Maya the freelancer anymore. I wasn't Maya the gold digger. I wasn't Maya who needed to be saved. I was Maya Brooks, founder and CEO of Data Flow Systems, the woman who had just sold the future to the husband of the woman who hated her, and none of them had a clue. The suffocation of the room suddenly felt different. It wasn't the weight of their judgment anymore. It was the heavy, breathless silence before a bomb goes off, and I was holding the detonator. Dinner was served at 8:30. Wagyu beef that melted on the tongue, roasted vegetables that had been sourced from some farm with a pedigree, wine that cost more per bottle than I'd spent on groceries in a month back when data flow was just an idea and a prayer. I pushed the food around my plate and said very little. Victoria kept the conversation flowing with stories about her latest charity gala. Patricia offered passive-aggressive comments about wedding planning, and Robert held court at the head of the table like a king surveying his kingdom. Ethan sat beside me, his hand occasionally finding my knee under the table. Not in affection, but in warning. Don't make waves. Don't say anything controversial. Don't embarrass me. Each touch made me angrier. After dessert, some architectural marvel of chocolate and gold leaf, Robert cleared his throat. Maya, he said, his voice taking on a formal tone that made everyone at the table sit up straighter. Before we end the evening, there's something we'd like to discuss with you. Ethan, why don't you and Maya join me in the study? It wasn't a question. Ethan's hand tightened on my knee, then released. Of course, he said, standing and offering me his hand. I took it, letting him help me up, playing the role of the grateful girlfriend one more time. The study was everything a rich man's study should be. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books that had never been opened, a massive oak desk that probably weighed more than my car. Robert stood behind the desk, and seated in one of the chairs was a man I'd never met. Late 50s, gray suit, the kind of bland face that was designed to be forgettable. Maya, this is Roger Bennett, Robert said. Our family attorney. My stomach dropped. I knew what this was. I'd known it was coming eventually, but I'd hoped, stupidly, naively, that they'd at least wait until closer to the wedding. Hello, I said, shaking Roger's hand. His grip was firm, professional. utterly impersonal. "Please, sit." Robert gestured to the chair across from Roger. Ethan remained standing, positioned between me and his father like a referee at a boxing match. On the desk was a document, thick, bound, official. "As you enter this union," Robert began, his voice taking on the cadence of a prepared speech, "we believe in transparency. This is a prenuptial agreement." Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. He was studying the pattern on the Persian rug like it held the secrets of the universe. "It's standard," he mumbled. "Just a formality. My parents insisted." Roger opened the document, his finger tracing down the first page. "The agreement stipulates that all assets acquired prior to the marriage remain separate property," he explained in a monotone that suggested he'd given this speech 1,000 times. "It also states that any assets acquired or liquidated during the engagement period are considered separate property of the originating party. Additionally, there's a cap on spousal support in the event of divorce, and any inheritance or future family trusts are strictly excluded from marital assets." I looked at the document, at Roger, at Robert's expectant face, at Ethan's guilty one. They were building a fortress to keep the barbarian out. For a moment, just a moment, I considered telling them the truth, pulling out my phone and showing them my bank balance, proving I wasn't a gold digger, that I didn't need their money, that I was about to become wealthier than any of them could imagine. But then I thought, why? Why give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd been wrong? Why rob myself of the pure crystalline joy of watching them discover it on their own terms in the most public way possible? And more importantly, this prenup would protect me. Everything in it was designed to keep Ethan's family money away from me, but it would also keep my money away from him. The deal was closing tomorrow morning, technically during our engagement period, which meant, according to this document, that $180 million would be mine and mine alone. They were locking me out of their garden, not realizing they were locking themselves out of a palace. "Do you want to read it first?" Roger asked, surprised by my silence. "I usually advise independent counsel to review before signing." I picked up the pen. The room froze. Robert blinked. Patricia, who had appeared in the doorway at some point, straightened up. Victoria, lurking behind her mother, looked confused. "No need," I said breezily. "I trust Ethan." It wasn't entirely a lie. I trusted him to be exactly who he was. A man who would choose his family's approval over my dignity every single time. I flipped to the back page and signed my name with a flourish, Maya Brooks. I handed the pen back to Roger, who stared at the signature like it might disappear. "Well," he stammered, "if you're sure?" "I'm very sure." I looked at Ethan. He looked relieved, but also slightly confused. He'd prepared a whole speech, armed himself for a battle that had never materialized. He didn't understand that I'd just signed the most important document of my financial life. By signing that prenup, I had legally severed Ethan Whitmore from any claim to the fortune that would hit my account in approximately 11 hours. He thought he was fencing me out. He had no idea he'd just locked himself out. "Is that all?" I asked, standing up and smoothing down my dress. "Well, yes," Robert said, still processing. "If you're sure you don't want—" "I'm tired," I interrupted. "I think I'll head home. I have a big day tomorrow." "Going to apply for that receptionist job?" Victoria called from the doorway, trying to regain her footing. But her insult lacked its usual sting. She was unsettled by my compliance, by my lack of resistance. "Something like that," I replied. I walked out of the study, through the foyer with its judgmental portrait ancestors, and out into the humid night air. The gravel crunched under my feet, a satisfying sound like breaking bones. I sat in my Honda for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me like a blanket. My phone buzzed, a text from my CFO, Alex Turner. "The ink is dry. Transfer initiated. Deal price, $180 million cash. Press release scheduled for Bloomberg Terminal at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Congratulations, boss." You did it. I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window, I could see them still standing in the study, probably toasting to their victory, congratulating themselves on securing the family fortune against the invader. I put the car in gear and drove away. Tomorrow, the world would change. Tomorrow, the mask would fall. But tonight, I let them have their silence. It was the last night of peace they would ever know. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious or excited or afraid. I simply couldn't. My mind was too alive, too electric with the knowledge of what was coming. I lay in my penthouse bed, the one in the apartment Ethan had never seen, had never been invited to, and watched the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Chicago slowly rotated from night into morning. At 4 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I made coffee in my kitchen, the one with the La Marzocco espresso machine that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and stood at the window, watching the darkness gradually soften into gray. At 5 a.m., I showered. At 5:30, I opened my closet, the real one, not the small collection of appropriate clothes I kept at Ethan's apartment for appearances. The white Alexander McQueen suit had been hanging there for 3 years, still in its garment bag, waiting. I'd bought it the day we signed our first major contract with a hospital network in Seattle. 7 figures. Proof that data flow wasn't just a dream, but a viable business that could change an entire industry. I'd told myself I'd wear it the day I made my first public appearance as CEO. The day I stopped hiding. Today was that day. The suit fit perfectly, tailored to within a millimeter of precision, sharp enough to cut glass. I paired it with simple black heels, minimal jewelry, and pulled my hair back into a sleek ponytail. No softness, no apology, just clean lines and cold authority. At 6 a.m., I stood in front of my wall-mounted screen and refreshed the Bloomberg terminal. 6:01 a.m. The headline appeared. Axiom Group acquires data flow systems in all-cash, deal valued at $180 million. Mystery founder revealed, Maya Brooks named Chief Strategy Officer. Below it, a photo I'd taken 3 days ago in my penthouse wearing this exact suit. Arms crossed, expression neutral. Eyes that said, I knew where the bodies were buried because I dug the graves myself. I took a sip of my espresso. It tasted like vindication. My tablet lit up simultaneously. Forbes had run their exclusive, the one we'd negotiated under strict embargo, the one they'd been holding for this exact moment. The photo took up half the screen. The headline screamed, The Logistics Queen Who Rejected Silicon Valley, How Maya Brooks Built an Empire in the Shadows. I set my coffee down and let myself feel it. Not triumph, not yet. Just the quiet, profound satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. Across the city, in the breakfast nook of the Whitmore estate, I knew exactly what was happening. I'd studied their routine for 2 years. I could visualize the chaos with perfect clarity. Brandon would be sitting at the head of the table, scrolling through his iPad, checking internal memos before heading to the office. He liked to arrive armed with information, ready to pretend he had insider knowledge. He would see the urgent flag, corporate restructuring, executive level. His finger would tap the screen, casual, bored, arrogant. Then, the freeze. The memo would be short. Welcome the new leadership team. Highlight the strategic acquisition of data flow systems. And there, in bold font, the name of his new superior. The person who now had authority to sign off on his budget, his bonus, his continued employment. Maya Brooks, Chief Strategy Officer. I imagined the color draining from his face, the ceramic mug slipping from his fingers, bouncing off the table, hot coffee spilling across his pressed slacks. It's a mistake, he'd stammer, his voice high and thin. It's a typo. It has to be. Victoria would be there, buttering toast, annoyed by the disruption. What are you shouting about? The memo, Brandon would gasp. Axiom bought Dataflow. The founder, it says the founder is Maya. Victoria would laugh. Of course she would. The idea was so absurd to her worldview that her brain would reject it like a bad transplant. Don't be stupid, Todd. Maya drives a Honda. She probably applied for a janitorial position there and got confused. Look at the photo. And then the second wave would hit. The television in the corner of their kitchen, usually tuned to CNBC for background noise, would confirm the nightmare. I turned up the volume on my own screen. The anchor, a woman with perfect hair and a serious expression, was speaking rapidly. Breaking news in the tech sector this morning. The mysterious unicorn Data Flow Systems has finally come out of stealth mode with a massive exit. We're looking at an all-cash injection of $180 million from Axiom Group. Joining us via satellite later this morning will be the founder, Maya Brooks, a woman who has reportedly been running this logistics empire while flying completely under the radar. Industry analysts are calling this the most strategic acquisition of the decade. They cut to B-roll footage, me walking into Axiom headquarters earlier that morning, flanked by 2 security guards and my legal team. I looked untouchable. In the Whitmore kitchen, Victoria would be staring at the TV, the toast forgotten, the smirk that lived permanently on her face sliding off, replaced by slack-jawed horror. She would remember the flyer, the text messages about cashier jobs, the comment about dead weight. She would realize, with a sickening lurch in her stomach, that she'd been trying to bully a shark while standing in a wading pool. My personal phone, the one I'd left on the kitchen island, the one connected to my old life, began to vibrate. It buzzed against the marble like an angry hornet. I walked over and looked at the screen. Ethan, missed call to Ethan. Missed call, Ethan, missed call. The texts started rolling in, stacking up faster than I could read them. Babe, where are you? Did you see the news? Is this real? Why didn't you tell me? Pick up the phone. Maya, please, my parents are freaking out. Todd is hyperventilating. Call me. I watched the notifications scroll by, feeling absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no anger. Just the cold, hard efficiency of a task being completed. The Maya who would have panicked at his distress, who would have rushed to explain and comfort him. That Maya had died in a freezing storage unit 5 years ago. Her ghost had been haunting this relationship, but she'd finally faded away last night when Ethan hesitated to answer my question. Would you still marry me if I had nothing? 5 seconds. 5 seconds too long. I reached out and pressed the power button, held it down until the screen went black. That part of my life was offline. I turned my attention to my secure work phone, sleek, encrypted, silent except for the notifications that mattered. The messages from the tech world had started coming in around 5 a.m., as soon as the embargo lifted and the news began spreading through Silicon Valley. Jeff B., Amazon. Incredible exit, Maya. Welcome to the club. Let's talk integration next week. Sundar, Google. Congratulations on the Axiom deal, a masterclass in leverage. We'll be watching. Tim C., Apple. Well played, the names of titans, the architects of the modern world. They knew, the industry knew. While the Whitmores had been sleeping in their expensive beds, dreaming their small dreams, the people who actually mattered had been watching me. My co-founder David sent a gif of champagne popping. Rachel, my lead engineer, sent a string of fire emojis and the message, "We did it, boss!" Alex, my CFO, was more practical. Media requests are flooding in. Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch. Forbes wants a follow-up. CNBC wants you on Squawk Box Monday morning. How do you want to handle? I typed back. Schedule CNBC. Decline the rest for now. Let them come to us. Then I opened the thread I'd been avoiding, the one from my personal phone that had somehow synced to this device. Victoria's texts told a story in 4 acts. 8:03 a.m. What the hell is going on? Is that you on Bloomberg? Call me. 8:15 a.m. This has to be a mistake. Todd is screaming at the TV. You need to clear this up before you embarrass Ethan further. People are texting me. 8:45 a.m. Maya, answer me. Is it true? Did you really sell that little computer thing for that much money? Todd says it's cash. Call me right now. And then the pivot. The moment reality set in. 9:10 a.m. OMG, sweetie. I just watched the full segment. I'm screaming. I literally just told the girls at the club. I knew you were a genius. We always knew. I'm so proud of you. We need to celebrate. Champagne on me. Call your favorite sister-in-law back. Love you. I let out a short, dry laugh that echoed in my empty penthouse. Favorite sister-in-law. 12 hours ago, I was dead weight. Now I was sweetie. The speed at which her moral compass spun to align with the magnetic north of money was almost impressive. Almost. Patricia's message was more restrained, but no less transparent. Maya, dear, this is quite a surprise. We had no idea you were so accomplished. Perhaps we could have lunch this week. We should discuss the wedding properly. I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Family is so important, don't you think? Call me when you have a moment. X. Oh, even Robert had texted. A man who had never texted me in his life. Maya, congratulations on your success. Clearly, we underestimated your capabilities. Let's arrange a time to talk. There are opportunities for collaboration between our institutions that could benefit everyone. Robert, translation. Please don't destroy my career. But it was Ethan's voicemails that painted the clearest picture of his evolution. I put the phone on speaker and listened to them in chronological order. VM 1742 AM. Babe, where did you go? Your stuff is still here, but you're gone. Call me when you get this. VM 3807 AM. Maya, I saw the news. I can't breathe. Is that real? Is that really you? Why didn't you tell me? I don't understand. Please, call me back. VM 7, 8:34 AM. Okay, I'm freaking out. Everyone is texting me. My fraternity brothers, people from work, my parents are losing their minds. Maya, please, I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry about last night. I was stressed. You know I didn't mean those things I said about carrying both of us. I was just... Please call me. 12. Sabanine Epidina. I love you. I've always loved you. The money doesn't change anything, okay? We're still us. We're still Maya and Ethan. I don't care about the $180 million. I just care about you. Please believe me. Come back. Let's talk about this. Fethin 10:03 AM. I'm scared. Everyone is looking at me differently now, like I did something wrong. My mom won't stop calling. Todd is having a panic attack. Victoria keeps asking what I knew and when I knew it. Maya, please, I need you. Where are you? The last one was barely coherent. I could hear him crying. A year ago, that sound would have broken me. I would have dropped everything, rushed to his apartment, held him while he fell apart, promised him that we could fix anything together. But today, sitting in my penthouse in my Alexander McQueen suit, I felt nothing but a distant, hollow pity. It was like watching a stranger cry over a lost lottery ticket. I deleted all the voicemails without responding. At 10:30 AM, my driver James, former Secret Service, utterly professional, texted that he was downstairs with the car. I took one last look at Chicago from my windows. The city looked different in the morning light, sharper, clearer, mine. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door. It was time to go to work. The black SUV cut through morning traffic with the efficiency of a knife through butter. James drove with the quiet competence of someone who'd once protected presidents, and I sat in the back, reviewing files on my tablet and ignoring the continued buzzing of my personal phone. Axiom Global Headquarters was a glass tower in the financial district, 52 floors of steel and ambition. As we approached, I could see a crowd gathering near the entrance. Photographers, reporters, freelance paparazzi who'd tracked down the mystery tech CEO. There's a crowd, Ms. Brooks, James said, glancing in the rearview mirror. Do you want me to take you to the parking garage entrance? No, I said, closing my tablet. Front entrance. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. No hiding, no apologizing, no shrinking. The SUV pulled up to the curb and the crowd surged forward immediately. James was out and opening my door in seconds, his body positioned to block anyone who got too close. I stepped out into a wall of sound and light. Ms. Brooks, Maya, over here. How does it feel to close a $180 million deal? Were you hiding your success intentionally? What's your message to other women in tech? Flashbulbs popped in a blinding staccato rhythm. I put on my sunglasses, not to hide, but to make a point. I didn't smile, I didn't wave. I just walked toward the revolving doors with the steady, unhurried pace of someone who owned the building, which, in a way, I sort of did now. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate power, marble floors, 30-foot ceilings, and the hushed atmosphere of serious money. But today, the atmosphere was different. Charged, electric. Employees huddled in small groups, whispering. As I walked past the security desk, heads turned, eyes widened, I saw the recognition ripple through the crowd like a wave. These were people who, until yesterday, would have looked right through me. Now they looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. I swiped my new badge at the turnstile. It beeped green. Authorized. Brandon worked on the 14th floor. I was going to the 50th. As the elevator ascended, my ears popped. I watched the numbers climb. 14. I imagined Brandon at his desk, staring at the wall, wondering if he should start packing now or wait for security to escort him out. The doors opened on the 50th floor. The air up here was different, rarefied, quieter, the carpet thicker. Standing at the end of the hallway was Arthur Sterling, CEO of Axiom. No relation to the Whitmores, just an unfortunate coincidence of common names that had caused some confusion in the beginning. Arthur was 63, silver-haired and ruthless in the way that only truly successful people can be. He'd built Axiom from a regional trucking company into a global logistics empire, and he was the only person in this building I actually respected. "Maya," he said, extending his hand. He didn't look at me like a girl. He looked at me like a fellow predator. "Welcome to the other side of the table." "Good morning, Arthur," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "I trust the wire transfer went through smoothly?" "Cleared at 6:01, he said with a dry chuckle. "You have expensive taste and timing. Quality costs extra." He smiled. A real smile, not the polite corporate kind. "The board is waiting. They're very eager to meet the woman who forced us to pay 30% over market value." "I prefer to think of it as recognizing true value," I said. We walked toward the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. I could hear the murmur of voices inside. These were the masters of the universe. Men who controlled shipping lanes, who decided the price of grain in Africa and the availability of medicine in rural America. And I was about to walk in there and tell them how to run their business. Arthur reached for the door handle, then paused. "Fair warning. Hayes is downstairs making a scene. Security had to escort him away from the main entrance. He's claiming he needs to brief you on his division." "Brandon can wait," I said. "He'll have plenty of time to talk during his performance review." Arthur's smile widened. "I like you, Maya. You're going to fit in just fine here." He opened the doors. The conversation inside stopped instantly. 12 men in expensive suits turned to look at me. I recognized most of them from the due diligence meetings: CFO Henderson, the heads of operations, logistics and technology, various VPs whose titles were long and whose actual jobs were vague. I stepped into the room. I didn't smile. I didn't apologize for being late. I walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, the one to the right of the CEO, the seat reserved for the chief strategy officer. I placed my briefcase on the table and unclasped it. The sound was sharp, crisp, like a gunshot in a canyon. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, "we have a lot of work to do, and based on the quarterly reports I read last night, we're going to start by addressing significant inefficiencies in middle management." I saw a few of them exchange nervous glances. "Henderson," I continued, turning to the CFO, "walk me through your integration plan for the data flow engineering team." He cleared his throat and pulled up a spreadsheet on the large screen. "We're proposing a 40% reduction in the data flow engineering staff. We already have a team of 300 engineers. We can migrate the code maintenance to our existing offshore team, which will save us approximately—" "No," I said. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Henderson blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You're acquiring data flow for the proprietary AI architecture," I said, leaning forward. "That code isn't a static object you can hand off to the lowest bidder. It's a living system. It learns. It adapts. It requires constant refinement. And the only people who understand its language are the 200 engineers you just suggested firing." "But the cost synergies—" Henderson tried. "The synergy comes from revenue growth, not cost cutting," I interrupted. "My team stays, all of them, with a 10% retention bonus locked in for 2 years. That's non-negotiable." I looked at Arthur. He was watching me with approval. "She's right," Arthur said to Henderson. "We bought the brain. You don't lobotomize the brain the day after the transplant. Henderson made a note, looking sour but compliant. However, I continued, I do agree we have redundancy, but it's not in engineering. It's in middle management. The room shifted uncomfortably. Specifically, the Legacy Logistics Oversight Division. I've reviewed the efficiency reports for the Midwest branch. There's a culture of stagnation. Vice presidents who spend more time on golf courses than in warehouses. Managers who rely on intuition rather than data. I tapped my pen on the mahogany table. I'm proposing a cultural optimization audit. Full review of every vice president and director in the Chicago office. We need to assess their technical literacy. If they can't explain how our AI integration works by the end of the month, they're out. We're a tech company now. We can't have leadership that dismisses innovation as, what was the phrase, smoke and mirrors. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the room. An audit, Henderson said, writing furiously. That seems aggressive. Do you have a specific department in mind? Arthur asked, though I suspected he already knew the answer. Yes, I said, my eyes cold and steady. Let's start with domestic supply chain management. I feel there's a significant misalignment of values there. Brandon's department. Arthur nodded slowly. Approved. Maya, you'll lead the review personally. You know what we need. I do, I said. I know exactly what we need. The meeting continued for another hour. Discussions of integration timelines, technology roadmaps, market positioning. I participated in all of it, offering insights, pushing back when necessary, establishing myself not as a newcomer to be tolerated, but as a force to be reckoned with. When we finally adjourned at noon, Arthur walked me to my new office. You didn't have to come in today, he said as we walked down the corridor. Most people would have taken the weekend to celebrate. I wanted to see his face, I said. Hayes? I nodded. Arthur laughed, a genuine, appreciative sound. Personal? He called my company garbage at my engagement party, while I was standing right there. Arthur stopped walking and turned to look at me. Your engagement party? To one of the Whitmores? Ethan Whitmore, Victoria is Brandon's wife. Arthur's eyebrows rose. Christ, talk about mixing business and family. Not anymore, I said. As of last night, there is no engagement. Good, Arthur said simply. Never marry someone who doesn't see your value, and definitely never marry into a family that doesn't respect you. We reached my office, a corner suite with windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It was minimalist, powerful, perfect. Welcome to Axiom, Maya, Arthur said. If you need anything, you know where to find me. He left, and I stood alone in my new office, looking out at the city. Somewhere down there, Brandon was panicking. Victoria was deleting her social media history. Patricia was drafting apology notes. And Ethan... My desk phone rang. The internal line. Ms. Brooks, the security officer said, his voice crackling through the speaker. There's a gentleman in the lobby causing a disturbance. He's waving around an old visitor badge claiming he has clearance to see you. I didn't need to ask who it was. It's Ethan Whitmore, I said. He says he's my fiancé. There was a pause. Should we remove him? I could have him thrown out. It would be easy, satisfying even, but that would be messy. That would give him a story to tell, a narrative where he was the martyr denied a chance to speak. Send him up, I said, but have security escort him to the door. And Rachel? My assistant appeared in the doorway. She'd come with me from Dataflow, sharp, efficient, utterly loyal. Yes? Stay in the room. I want a witness. 5 minutes later, the elevator chimed down the hall. I stayed seated behind my desk. A deliberate power move. I wanted him to walk the long distance from the door to where I sat. I wanted him to take in the army of analysts working in the glass-walled conference room next door. I wanted him to see the 2 junior lawyers sitting on my sofa, reviewing intellectual property filings. I wanted him to understand how completely he'd misjudged me. The heavy glass door pushed open and Ethan stepped through. He looked like a man who'd been running against the wind. His suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his tie loosened. He'd probably slept in his clothes, if he'd slept at all. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild. He stopped 3 feet into the room, looking around like he'd stepped into an alternate dimension. He stared at the view, at the lawyers, at Rachel standing by the wall with her tablet, ready to document everything. Then, finally, he looked at me. "Maya," he breathed out. The name sounded foreign in this space. "My God, this place, is this all yours?" "It's the office assigned to the chief strategy officer," I said, my voice completely neutral. "You have 5 minutes, Ethan. I have an integration meeting at 2:15. The coldness seemed to snap him out of his awe. His face shifted, contorting into hurt and indignation. He walked closer, placing his hands on the edge of my desk, leaning in. "5 minutes?" His voice shook. "We're engaged, Maya. We're supposed to get married in 3 months. And you give me 5 minutes? After you humiliated me?" "I humiliated you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Bloomberg broke the news, Ethan. Not me. I haven't said a word to the press about you." "You know what I mean." He slammed his hand on the desk. The lawyers on the sofa stopped reading. The security guard at the door took a step forward, but I held up a hand. "You let me believe you were nothing," Ethan hissed, lowering his voice but intensifying the anger. "You let my family mock you. You let me lecture you about money, about responsibility. You let me buy you dinner with my parents' credit card while you were sitting on a fortune. Why? To make me look like a fool?" His pain was real. I could see that. Maybe that's what made it worse, knowing that he actually felt betrayed, that in his mind, I was the villain of this story. "It wasn't a game, Ethan," I said quietly. My voice cracked slightly, the first show of vulnerability since he'd walked in. "It was a test." "A test?" He laughed bitterly. "You don't test people you love, Maya." "I told you I was working," I continued, my throat tight. "I told you I was building something. You chose to interpret that as unemployed. You chose to see my silence as failure because it made you feel superior. You needed me to be small so you could feel big." Ethan recoiled like I'd slapped him. He stood up straight, running a hand through his hair. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. I was an idiot. I admit it. My family can be a lot, and I got caught up in it. But Maya, look at us." He gestured around the office. "Look at what we have. We've been together for 2 years. You can't just throw that away because I made a mistake." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I love you. I stayed with you when I thought you were broke, didn't I?" "You stayed with me," I repeated slowly. "But you didn't respect me. And last night, when I asked if you'd still marry me if I had nothing, you couldn't answer. That wasn't stress, Ethan. That was truth. I was trying to be practical," he pleaded. "But none of that matters now. We're here. You're successful. I'm so proud of you. Think about it. You have the capital. I have the legal connections. We could be a power couple. This changes everything." There it was, the pivot I'd been waiting for. In 30 seconds, he'd gone from accuser to partner. He was already mentally spending the money, imagining the galas, the new house, the way his friends would look at him. "It changes nothing for you, Ethan," I said. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean there is no we in this equation, and there is certainly no empire that involves you." His face hardened. The desperation turned into something uglier. "You can't just cut me out," he said, his voice taking on a litigious edge. "We're engaged. In the eyes of the law, there's an expectation of shared future assets. And frankly, Maya, if you want to play hardball, I could argue you entered into our engagement under false pretenses. You hid material assets. That's fraud." I almost laughed. It was so predictable. He was a mediocre lawyer making a mediocre threat. "False pretenses?" I asked. "Interesting theory." "It's not a theory," Ethan said, gaining confidence. "We have a contract, an agreement to marry, and we have a prenuptial agreement that assumes full disclosure." "Ah, yes," I said, opening my desk drawer. "The prenup." I pulled out a photocopy of the document we'd signed last night. I'd sent the digital file to my lawyer before I'd even left his parents' house. I slid it across the desk toward him. "I'm glad you brought this up, because my legal team tells me it's ironclad. It was drafted by Roger Blackwood, wasn't it? Your family's shark. Very good. Expensive, but good. Ethan looked at the document, confused. Yeah, so? It proves we have a legally binding— Read Clause 4, Section B, I interrupted, pointing with my pen. The one your father insisted on, the one meant to protect your trust fund from the gold digger. Ethan looked down, squinting at the legalese. I recited it from memory. Any and all assets acquired, created, or liquidated by either party, whether prior to the marriage or during the engagement period, shall remain the sole and separate property of the originating party. Furthermore, both parties explicitly waive any claim to the appreciation value of said separate property. I leaned back in my chair. You see, Ethan, when I signed that last night, the deal with Axiom was already in escrow. But the transfer of funds, the actual liquidation event, happened at 6:01 this morning, technically during our engagement period. I watched his face as understanding dawned. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. You signed a document, drafted by your own lawyer, that explicitly states you have no right to my company, my stock, or the $180 million in cash that hit my account today. You built a wall to keep me out of your tiny trust fund, Ethan, and in doing so, you locked yourself out of my fortune. He stared at the paper, his hands shaking. You knew, he whispered. You knew when you signed it. Of course I knew, I said coldly. I read fast, and unlike you, I don't sign things I don't understand. This is entrapment, he stammered, grasping for words. It's contract law, and if you try to challenge it, I'll bury you in litigation so deep you'll need a submarine to find sunlight. My legal budget for the next fiscal year is larger than your firm's entire revenue. Ethan looked at me. Really looked at me. For what felt like the first time. The arrogance was gone. The love was gone. Even the greed was gone, replaced by the hollow, crushing realization of total defeat. He looked around the office again, at the luxury, at the staff, at the power. He realized he didn't belong here. He never had. I checked the time on my desktop monitor. You've overstayed your 5 minutes, I said, turning my attention back to the documents on my desk. Rachel, please show Mr. Whitmore out, and notify the lobby that his visitor pass is permanently revoked. Maya, he started, his voice cracking. Goodbye, Ethan, I said without looking up. I have a company to run, and I believe you have a job to find. I heard your firm frowns on associates who generate negative publicity. I didn't watch him leave. I heard his footsteps, heavy and slow, retreating across the plush carpet. I heard the glass door open. I heard it close with a soft click. Only then did my hand tremble slightly. I took a deep breath, pressing my palms flat against the desk until they steadied. Ms. Brooks? Rachel's voice was gentle. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said. And I was. I looked up at her. Can you bring me the file on the charitable trust structure? And a coffee, black. Right away. The door closed. The room was quiet again, save for the hum of the city below. I picked up my pen and drew a line through a paragraph of the merger agreement. It was time to get back to work. 3 days passed in a blur of meetings, press interviews, and the systematic dismantling of outdated corporate structures. I barely slept. Not from stress, but from the sheer momentum of it all. The machine I'd built in secret was finally running at full power, and I was drunk on the efficiency of it. Dataflow's integration with Axiom was proceeding ahead of schedule. My team was thriving. The stock options I'd protected for them had vested immediately upon sale, and watching my engineers, people who'd believed in me when we were coding in a freezing garage, become millionaires overnight was more satisfying than any personal victory. But the Whitmores wouldn't go quietly. On Thursday afternoon, Arthur knocked on my office door. It was unusual. He typically called or emailed. The fact that he'd walked down here himself meant something. Got a minute? He asked. For you? Always. He closed the door and sat across from my desk, his expression carefully neutral. I received a call this morning from Robert Whitmore. My jaw tightened. I see. He's concerned that personal dynamics might interfere with the integration. Specifically, he's worried about Brandon Hayes' performance review. Arthur leaned back. He's proposing a family dinner, Saturday night. He framed it as a necessary summit to ensure everyone's on the same page. And you're telling me this because Because he's not wrong to be concerned. Arthur's eyes were sharp. Hayes is in your chain of command now. If this turns into a vendetta, it reflects poorly on both of us. I need you to be above reproach. I bristled. I haven't done anything. I know, Arthur interrupted gently. But perception matters. Go to the dinner. Let them say their piece. Be professional. Then, he smiled slightly, then you can bury them with documentation and process. Clean. Legal. Unassailable. I stared at him. You want me to sit through dinner with people who humiliated me? Who called me worthless? I want you to close the loop, Arthur said. So there's no question later that you gave them a fair chance. Hayes has already filed a complaint with HR claiming you're biased against him due to personal history. He what? It'll go nowhere. His performance record is abysmal, but it muddies the waters. Arthur stood. Go to the dinner. Be gracious. Then come Monday morning, you can do whatever you want within company policy, which conveniently, I'm sure, will align perfectly with what needs to be done. After he left, I sat alone in my office, anger and exhaustion warring inside me. Part of me wanted to refuse, to let them stew, to never give them the satisfaction of my presence again. But Arthur was right. If I was going to destroy them, it had to be systematic, professional, beyond reproach. I picked up my phone and texted James. Saturday evening, Whitmore Estate, full security protocol. His response was immediate. Understood. Armored vehicle? Yes. If I was going back to that house, I was going on my terms. Saturday arrived too quickly. I spent the afternoon preparing, not emotionally, but strategically. I reviewed Brandon's performance files, flagged discrepancies in departmental budgets, and prepared talking points. If this dinner went sideways, I wanted ammunition. At 5:30, I dressed. Not the Alexander McQueen this time. That would be too aggressive, too, I'm here to conquer you. Instead, I chose a tailored charcoal Armani pantsuit. Understated, expensive, the kind of thing that whispered power rather than shouting it. James picked me up at 6 in the black SUV. As we drove through the city toward the suburbs, I watched Chicago give way to manicured lawns and old money. My chest tightened with each mile. You all right, Ms. Brooks? James asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Just remembering why I left, I said. The Whitmore estate looked exactly the same, imposing, beautiful, cold. But this time, when James pulled up to the front portico, he didn't park discreetly in back. He stopped directly in front of the main entrance, the SUV blocking the decorative fountain. Before I could even unbuckle, the front door opened. Patricia stood in the doorway, wearing a silk caftan that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Her smile was so bright it looked painful. Maya, she exclaimed, arms spread wide. We're so glad you could make it. Come in, the air is getting chilly. I stepped out of the SUV, and James moved to follow, but I shook my head slightly. Wait here, I murmured. I'll text if I need you. Understood. Patricia was still standing at the door, that manic smile plastered on her face. I walked past her without accepting the hug she was angling for. Hello, Patricia. Oh, Maya, please, call me Mom, or at least Trish. We're family. She fluttered behind me as I entered the foyer. Everyone's waiting in the dining room. We opened a special bottle just for you, that Screaming Eagle you like. I stopped walking. How did you know about that? A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Oh, Victoria mentioned it. She said, well, we just wanted to make sure you felt welcome. So they'd researched my preferences, done their homework. This was going to be a performance. The dining room had been transformed from the last time I'd seen it. Gone was the casual Wednesday night setup. The table was set with the royal china, the Limoges service that Patricia claimed was too precious for regular use. The lighting was soft, flattering. Crystal gleamed, silver sparkled. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a seduction. Robert stood at the head of the table, looking distinguished in a navy blazer. He'd clearly just gotten a haircut. Maya, he said warmly, gesturing to the seat at his right, the seat of honor. Please, sit. We're so happy you could join us. Ethan was there, of course. He stood by his chair like a man at a sentencing hearing, wearing a suit that seemed slightly too large, as if he'd physically shrunk in the past 3 days. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And then there was Victoria. The transformation was almost grotesque. Gone was the loud, provocative socialite. She wore a high-necked navy dress that looked like something from a Jane Austen adaptation. Modest, demure, designed to project respectability. Her jewelry was minimal. Her makeup was subdued. Her hair was pulled back in a simple chignon. She looked like she was trying to disappear into the wallpaper. Brandon stood behind her chair, one hand on her shoulder. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by the tense posture of a man waiting for the guillotine to drop. "Maya," Victoria said softly, stepping forward. Her hands were clasped in front of her like a supplicant. "Thank you so much for coming. Would you like some wine? We have that Screaming Eagle. Brandon remembered it was your favorite." She picked up the decanter with trembling hands. I looked at her, at the bottle. They'd bought the same wine I'd drunk alone in my penthouse the night I walked away from Ethan. The same $3,000 bottle that had been my private toast to freedom. They'd turned it into a prop. "Water is fine," I said. Victoria froze mid-pour. The rejection of the wine was a rejection of the olive branch. She swallowed hard, set down the decanter, and poured sparkling water into my crystal goblet with the nervous precision of someone defusing a bomb. "Of course," she whispered. "Whatever you'd like." I sat. They all sat. A uniformed server, someone I'd never seen before, probably hired just for tonight, brought out the first course. Truffle risotto with gold leaf. Of course, nothing but the best for the prodigal daughter-in-law. Robert cleared his throat. "Maya, we want to start by saying how incredibly proud we are of you." I took a sip of water and said nothing. "The accomplishment," he continued. "Building a company of that magnitude while maintaining such discretion. It's remarkable. Truly." He glanced around the table. "We've been fielding calls all week. Everyone wants to know the secret behind your success." "There is no secret, Robert," I said quietly. "Just 5 years of work that no one at this table bothered to ask about." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Robert forced a chuckle. "Well, now, let's not dwell on the past. We admit we were skeptical, but you have to understand our position. We're a family that values tradition. We're protective, perhaps too protective at times." Patricia leaned forward, her eyes shining with manufactured emotion. She reached under the table and pulled out a navy velvet box, worn at the corners. I recognized it immediately, the Whitmore emeralds. 6 months ago, I'd admired a photograph of this necklace in the hallway. Patricia had informed me, with a smile that never reached her eyes, that the necklace was entailed to the bloodline and would only ever be worn by a woman who brings significant standing to the family. The subtext had been clear, "Not you." Now, Patricia opened the box with a theatrical flourish. The emeralds glittered in the candlelight, heavy, green, ancient, probably worth $50,000. "Maya," Patricia said, her voice trembling with emotion that was at least 60% genuine. "I was going through the vault today, and I realized something. This necklace represents strength. It represents endurance. And looking at you now, I realize there is no one more suited to wear it." She pushed the box across the tablecloth toward me. "I want you to have it, as a welcome gift, properly this time, to show you that we consider you a true Whitmore." I looked at the necklace. It was beautiful. In another life, from another person, it might have meant something. But from Patricia, it was a collar, a bribe, a way to bring me back into the fold on their terms. "That's a lovely gesture, Patricia," I said, not touching the box. She beamed. "Here, let me put it on you." "No." The word was sharp enough to cut the air. Patricia's smile faltered. "But why not? It's a family heirloom." "Exactly," I said, meeting her eyes. "And as you told me very clearly last Christmas, it's for women of significant standing who enhance the family reputation." I pushed the box back toward her with one finger. "I believe my reputation is doing quite well on its own. I don't need your emeralds to validate my worth." I paused. "Besides, Green doesn't really go with my complexion." Patricia pulled the box back as if I'd burned her, snapping it shut with a loud click. "We're just trying to apologize." Ethan spoke up for the first time. His voice was tired, defeated. "Why do you have to be so difficult? Mom is trying to be nice." I turned to look at him. "Niceness that's conditional on my bank balance isn't niceness, Ethan. It's a transaction." Robert intervened, clearly trying to regain control of the narrative. He put down his fork and clasped his hands, adopting what I recognized as his boardroom negotiator persona. "Maya, look," he said, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "We know we were hard on you. We know we pushed you. But have you ever stopped to think that maybe, just maybe, that was the point?" I tilted my head. "Do enlighten me, Robert." He smiled, warming to his argument. "We saw potential in you from the beginning, real potential, but we also saw that you were unfocused, a dreamer. The world of high finance, the world you're entering now, it's a shark tank. We knew that if we made it too easy for you, you'd never develop the grit you needed to succeed." He spread his hands as if presenting an obvious truth. "The criticism, the pressure, yes, I'll admit it, the tough love. It was all a crucible, Maya. We were forging you, making you stronger. And look," he gestured around the room. "It worked. You're here now, successful, because we pushed you to be better." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to take credit for my success, trying to reframe years of casual cruelty as some kind of strategic mentorship program. "So, let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "Victoria sending me job listings for cashier positions? That was executive coaching?" Victoria let out a choked sob. It was a wet, strangled sound that might have been genuine. She dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't know," she wailed, her voice breaking. "Maya, you have to believe me. I was terrified for you. I thought you were being scammed, some internet thing that would collapse and leave you in debt. I thought you were going to drag Ethan down with you." She looked up at me with tearful eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something real beneath the performance. "I was trying to protect my brother," she continued, her voice dropping. "And I was trying to protect you from failure." I know I was harsh, but it came from a place of concern, of love. She paused, then added more quietly, "And if I'm being honest, which I guess I should be, I was jealous." That got everyone's attention. Robert's eyes narrowed. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Ethan looked up from his plate. Victoria wiped her eyes, smearing her carefully understated mascara. "You're everything I'm not, Maya. Smart, independent, self-made. I married for money." She glanced at Brandon, who looked pained. "Everyone knows it. I've never worked a real day in my life. I've never created anything. And there you were, struggling but building something real, and I couldn't handle it." She met my eyes. "I wanted you to fail because your success made me feel like a failure, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry." The room was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I wanted to believe her. Part of me, the part that remembered being an outsider, that understood what it felt like to be underestimated, wanted to accept this moment of vulnerability as real. But I also remembered the group chats, the messages forwarded by people I'd never even met, the sustained, systematic campaign of mockery that had gone on for 2 years. "Thank you for saying that, Victoria," I said finally. My voice was softer than before, but still firm. "I appreciate the honesty." She looked hopeful. "But," I continued, "I have the screenshots, from people I've never met, forwarding your messages about me being a loser, a charity case, a burden. Those weren't concerned warnings. They were entertainment for your social circle." Victoria's face crumpled. She shrank back in her chair, looking to Brandon for support. Brandon cleared his throat. He'd been eating his risotto quickly, as if he feared someone would take his plate away. Now he wiped his mouth and leaned forward, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a confidential man-to-man tone. "Listen, Maya," he said. "The girls get emotional. Family stuff is messy. But business is logical, and that's where you and I connect, right? He forced a smile. It was the smile of a man standing on a trapdoor trying to convince everyone the floor was solid. I saw the memo about the audit, he continued. The Cultural Optimization Initiative. Brilliant move, really. Shakes up the dead wood, gets people focused. He cleared his throat again. But I wanted to make sure we're on the same page. I've been at Axiom for 10 years. I know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. I know which clients are loyal, which vendors are reliable. I could be a real asset to you, Maya. He leaned closer, and I caught a whiff of his cologne mixed with nervous sweat. I heard the VP of North American Operations is retiring next year, Brandon said, his voice pitched low like he was sharing a secret. It's a natural succession position. And with a strong recommendation from you, from the Chief Strategy Officer, I could really step into that role. Help implement your vision on a larger scale. Keep the Whitmore name strong within the company. He sat back, looking pleased with his pitch. For the family. For us. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Brandon Hayes, who had called my life's work garbage, who had bragged about lowballing the company I'd bled for, who was now asking me to promote him. The silence stretched. I let it become uncomfortable. I took a sip of water, set down the glass with deliberate care, and met his eyes. Brandon, I said softly, do you remember the night of the engagement party? His smile wavered. What? You stood in that living room surrounded by your friends and you said data flow systems was smoke and mirrors. You said the CEO was probably some desperate nerd praying for a buyout. You said you'd strip the company for parts and offer no more than $20 million. The color began draining from his face. I remember, he said quickly, but I was misinformed. I didn't have the full data at that point. You know how it is. Sometimes intelligence lags behind. A good executive verifies his data before he speaks, I interrupted. And a good executive doesn't rely on nepotism to save him from performance reviews. I'm not asking for a handout, Brandon insisted, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. I'm asking for a chance, a fair evaluation of my contributions. You have a chance, I said. You have the same chance as every other employee in the Chicago office. You'll undergo the competency audit. You'll take the technical literacy exam. If you pass, you keep your job. If you fail... I shrugged. The market is tough right now, but I'm sure someone will value your particular skill set. But I'm family, Brandon blurted out, his voice rising. You can't. Maya, we're family. You can't just fire family. I'm not firing family, I said calmly. I'm optimizing a subsidiary, and based on the preliminary reports I reviewed yesterday, your department is operating at 60% efficiency. You spend 4 hours a week on client calls and 12 hours a week at the country club. Brandon's jaw dropped. How do you... I own the company, Brandon. I own the servers your calendar is hosted on. I own the GPS data from your company car. I own the expense reports showing your entertainment budget. I leaned forward slightly. I know everything. He looked wildly to Robert, but Robert was staring at his plate. The patriarch had realized he couldn't protect his son-in-law from a woman who literally owned the infrastructure of their lives. I placed my napkin on the table, didn't fold it, just dropped it. This has been educational, I said, starting to stand. You're leaving? Patricia asked, her voice going shrill. We haven't even had the main course. I'm not hungry, I said. And frankly, the air in here is stifling. I picked up my clutch and turned toward the door. Why did you come? Ethan's voice stopped me. He was still sitting, staring at his hands. If you hate us this much, why did you even come? I looked at him. At all of them. I don't hate you, Ethan, I said. Hate implies you have power over me. Hate implies passion. I paused. I came because Arthur asked me to. He wanted to make sure our personal history wouldn't be a distraction, that there would be no accusations of bias or unprofessionalism. I looked at each of them in turn. Robert, the failed manipulator. Patricia, the rejected queen. Victoria, the exposed bully. Brandon, the incompetent sycophant. Ethan, the coward. I came to tell you that there's no reconciliation, I said. There's no us. There's no family. I'm your employer's employer. I'm a shareholder. I'm a line item on balance sheets you can't erase. I started walking toward the door again. Wait! Robert's voice was sharp, commanding, the voice of a man who'd spent his life being obeyed. I kept walking. Maya, stop! He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't simply walk away. We're not finished. I reached the doorway to the foyer and turned. Robert strode after me, and the rest of the family followed like a school of fish following a shark, uncertain but unable to break away. You're threatening the stability of this family, Robert said, his voice rising, and I won't have it. You think you can come in here and intimidate us with some corporate restructuring? You're sorely mistaken. He stepped closer, and I could see the veins standing out on his neck. I have friends in this town, Maya, important friends. I can make sure the narrative of your success is painted very differently in the press. You're threatening me? I asked quietly. Something in my voice made him hesitate, but he'd committed to the course. I'm telling you how things work in Chicago, Robert said. You may have money now, but money without connections is nothing. Cross this family and you'll find yourself— Robert, I interrupted, my voice cold as winter. You should have stopped talking 30 seconds ago. I walked back up the steps from the foyer, not toward the door, but toward them. They instinctively backed up, clustering together like prey animals sensing a predator. I was going to wait until Monday to have HR deliver the news, I said, looking at Brandon. But since we're all here, we might as well be efficient. Brandon went pale. What news? I finished my review of the personnel files for the logistics division while I was being driven here tonight. I pulled my phone from my clutch and scrolled to a document. Your department has the lowest efficiency rating in the entire North American sector. You're bleeding money. In any other company, you'd be fired for cause. But, I held up a finger. However, I know how important family is to you. So, I'm not firing you. Brandon looked hopeful. Victoria clutched his arm. I'm reassigning you, I continued, to our cold chain field operations unit. Reassigning? Brandon's voice was weak. To where? We have a facility that's been struggling with inventory management. It requires hands-on leadership, someone willing to get their hands dirty. I smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It's in Nome, Alaska. Alaska? The word came out as a squeak. But I have a mortgage. Victoria is— We can't just move to B. It's a vital role, Brandon. You'll be managing deep freeze storage for seafood exports. It's minus 20 degrees there right now. I tilted my head. You start Monday. If you refuse the transfer, it will be considered a voluntary resignation, and you'll lose your severance package and your unvested stock options. I paused, letting that sink in. Which, given your mortgage and your wife's spending habits, I assume you can't afford to do. Brandon looked like he was going to vomit. He grabbed Victoria's arm for support, but Victoria was staring at me with pure hatred. You're a monster, Victoria spat. Sending him to Alaska? He has a family, a life here. You're just doing this to be spiteful because you're jealous of us. Jealous? I actually laughed. It was a genuine sound. Victoria, I'm not the one who's been stealing from a registered 501c3 charity for the last 4 years. The color drained from Victoria's face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. The Whitmore Hope Foundation, I said, reciting the name of their beloved charity. You're the treasurer, aren't you? Silence. Absolute silence, except for the ticking clock. My due diligence team ran a routine vendor analysis on all entities associated with Axiom executives and their families, standard protocol for SEC compliance. I pulled up another document on my phone. Do you know what they found? I took a step closer to her. She reeked of fear and expensive perfume. A recurring payment to a consulting firm called HS Designs. $3,000 a month, every month, for event planning services. I paused. But HS Designs doesn't plan events, does it, Victoria? It's a shell company registered to your maiden name, Harper Stone, and the bank account associated with it has very interesting spending patterns. Patricia let out a gasp, turning to stare at her daughter. Victoria, is this true? Neiman Marcus, I continued, reading from my phone. Saks Fifth Avenue, Four Seasons Maui, a Tesla Model X, Botox treatments at a medical spa in Lincoln Park. I looked up from the screen. $12,000 a year, Victoria, for 4 years. That's not a loan. That's embezzlement. It's federal wire fraud. It was just temporary, Victoria cried, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. I was going to pay it back. The foundation has plenty of money. Brandon needed help with his car payments, and Mom needed— Stop talking, Robert snapped at her. His face had gone purple. Victoria collapsed onto the stone bench by the door, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. But it wasn't the cry of a remorseful woman. It was the cry of a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. I haven't sent the documentation to the IRS yet, I said. I was debating whether it was worth the paperwork. But since you called me a monster, Victoria, I suppose I should live up to the title. Robert's face was now dangerously red. He turned on me, his hands balled into fists. That's enough, he shouted. You get off my property right now. You think you can come here and destroy my children? I'll ruin you, Maya. I'm the director of Sovereign Bank. Do you have any idea the influence I have? Sovereign Bank? I repeated, nodding slowly. Yes, I know it well. In fact, Data Flow Systems has been your branch's largest depositor for the last 2 years, about $40 million in liquid operating capital. Robert went very still. And the $180 million from the acquisition, that was wired into my holding account at Sovereign yesterday morning. I checked my watch. Technically, Robert, I'm your biggest client. I represent approximately 12% of your branch's total deposit base. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Or I was, I corrected myself. My CFO scheduled a full withdrawal of all funds for Monday morning. We're moving our business to Chase. We've been looking at their commercial banking services, much more responsive to our needs. Robert swayed on his feet. He grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. You can't, he whispered. The quarterly numbers. It will end my career. Then perhaps you should have been nicer to the gold digger, I said. Because it turns out I was the gold mine, and I just closed the shaft. The silence on the porch was absolute. The only sounds were the wind rustling through the manicured hedges and Victoria's muffled sobbing. They weren't just defeated. They were dismantled. Maya. Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. Maya, please, this is too much. You've made your point. Just stop. We can fix this. I can talk to Victoria. I can— Shut up, Liam! The scream came from Robert. He whirled on his son with such fury that Ethan actually flinched. Do not say another word, Robert hissed. Don't you understand? Every word out of your mouth makes it worse. Patricia grabbed Robert's arm. Don't antagonize her, she whispered urgently. She'll kill us. She'll actually kill us. Ethan froze, his mouth hanging open. He looked at his parents, the people he'd spent his entire life trying to please, the people whose approval he'd valued over my dignity, and he saw the truth. They didn't care about him. They only cared about survival. And right now, survival meant obeying me. Listen to your father, Ethan, I said softly. He finally understands who's in charge. I turned and walked down the marble steps. My heels clicked a steady rhythm, the sound of finality, of doors closing, of chapters ending. James had the SUV door open before I reached it. I slid into the back seat, and he closed the door behind me, sealing me in the quiet, leather-scented sanctuary. We're clear to go, Ms. Brooks? He asked. Yes, James, I said, looking out the tinted window at the group of people frozen on the porch, illuminated by the harsh light like statues in a graveyard. Drive, and don't stop until we're back in the city. As the car accelerated down the driveway, leaving the Whitmore estate in the dust, I felt a knot in my chest loosen. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was something cleaner, something colder. It was the feeling of a balance sheet finally, perfectly zeroing out. The debt was paid. The account was closed, and I was richer than I'd ever been before, not in money, but in the knowledge that I would never again let someone make me feel small. But as the estate disappeared in the rearview mirror and the city lights of Chicago began to glow on the horizon, I felt something else too, something I hadn't expected: loneliness. The car felt very large and very empty. I'd won, completely, utterly, but I'd won alone. And I didn't know yet whether that victory was worth the isolation it had cost me. My hand was on the door handle of the SUV when I stopped. There was something I'd forgotten, something still tethering me to this place, to these people, a weight on my left hand that I'd been too focused to notice until this moment. I stepped back out of the car. James looked concerned but said nothing. The engagement ring glinted under the amber porch lights. It was a solitaire, modest but tasteful, or so I'd thought when Ethan proposed. He'd told me it was vintage, a diamond from his grandmother's collection, reset in white gold. He'd spun a whole story about fighting his mother to give it to me, about how it represented our future together. I'd cried when he proposed, tears of gratitude that someone from his world would choose me. But looking at it now with the eyes of a woman who'd just negotiated a 9-figure deal, I could see what I'd been too in love to notice before. The stone was dull. It lacked the fire and refraction of a true diamond. It was cubic zirconia, maybe $200 from a mall kiosk. The family heirloom story was just like everything else, a fabrication designed to keep me grateful for scraps. I reached up and slid the ring off my finger. It came off easily, as if my body had been rejecting it for months and finally had permission to let go. There was a small wrought iron table next to the stone bench where Victoria was still weeping. I walked over and placed the ring on the glass surface. It clinked softly, looking small and pathetic, stripped of its sentimental value. Maya. Ethan choked out my name. He scrambled down the porch steps, nearly tripping over his own feet. "What are you doing? Please don't do this." "There's no wedding, Ethan," I said, my voice quiet but carrying clearly in the night air. "I'm canceling the venue in the morning. I'll cover the cancellation fees. Consider it my final gift to you." "No." The word came out strangled. "No, no, no." To my shock, and to the horror of his parents standing behind him, Ethan dropped to his knees. Right there on the gravel driveway, the stones crunched under his suit trousers. He reached out, grabbing the hem of my jacket with trembling hands. "You can't leave me," he sobbed. Tears streamed down his face, catching the light. "Maya, listen to me. I don't care about the money. I swear on my life I don't care about the $180 million. I loved you when you were broke. I loved you when we were eating takeout on the floor of that tiny apartment. That was real. We were real." I looked down at him. A year ago, this sight would have broken me. I would have dropped to my knees beside him, held his face, promised we could fix anything together. I would have believed that love could overcome anything. But tonight, looking at this man kneeling in the gravel, I felt only a distant, hollow pity, like watching a stranger cry over a lost lottery ticket. "Stand up, Ethan," I said gently. "You're ruining your suit." "Tell me you believe me," he begged, his grip tightening on my jacket. "Tell me you know I love you, that I always loved you. Please, Maya, please." I carefully pried his fingers off my clothes. I stepped back, creating a distance he couldn't bridge. "I think you believe you love me," I said, and my voice was softer than it had been all evening, tinged with genuine sadness. "But you don't love me, Ethan. You love the idea of yourself as a savior." He shook his head violently. "That's not true. You loved me because I was a project," I continued. "I was broken enough to make you feel strong, but safe enough not to threaten your fragile ego. You loved having someone to protect because it distracted you from the fact that you're too afraid to stand up to your own father." "Maya, that's not love, Ethan. That's codependency." I looked over his shoulder at Robert and Patricia, who were watching their son beg with expressions of disgust. Not disgust at his pain, disgust at his weakness. In the moment I became strong, The moment I became your equal or, God forbid, your superior, your love turned to resentment. I can change, Ethan pleaded, still on his knees. I can be different. I can be the man you need. Just give me a chance. No, I said, and the finality in my voice made him flinch. You can't. Not here. Not in this house. I gestured to the estate behind him. This place will always make you small, and I need someone who walks beside me, not someone who needs me to shrink so he can feel tall. I took a breath, feeling something crack in my chest. I need a partner, Ethan, not a charity project. I turned away from him, walked back toward the SUV. My footsteps on the gravel sounded loud and rhythmic, a steady beat of departure. I didn't look back at the ring on the table, didn't look back at the man kneeling in the dirt, didn't look back at the mansion that had loomed over my life like a prison for 2 years. I stepped into the SUV and pulled the heavy door shut. The lock engaged with a solid, satisfying thud, sealing out the weeping, the shouting, the suffocating expectations of the Whitmore dynasty. Go, I said to James. The engine purred to life. As we rolled down the long driveway, I watched the lights of the mansion fade in the rearview mirror, shrinking until they were nothing more than distant yellow pinpricks in the darkness. We reached the main gates at the bottom of the hill, and I expected relief. Freedom, the clean break I'd been fighting for. Instead, I was met with chaos. The gates were surrounded. At least 20 photographers, 3 news vans, and what looked like a dozen freelance paparazzi who'd tracked down the new tech billionaire to her ex-fiancé's family estate. They swarmed the car the moment the gates began to open, their cameras pressed against the iron bars like hungry eyes. Flashbulbs popped in a blinding, stroboscopic rhythm, illuminating the night like lightning. "Ms. Brooks! Ms. Brooks! Maya, over here! Is it true you dumped him? What's your next move? Did you know you were going to be rich when you got engaged?" James slowed the car to a crawl, navigating carefully through the sea of bodies. His jaw was tight, his hands steady on the wheel. "Do you want me to call the police to clear them?" he asked, eyeing the crowd warily. I looked out through the tinted window. They couldn't see me, but I could see them, the hunger in their faces, the obsession with the narrative. Yesterday, I'd been invisible. Today, I was the story, the mysterious tech CEO who'd fooled a society family, the gold mine they'd mistaken for a gold digger. "No," I said quietly. "Just keep driving." I pressed the button on the door, and the black privacy screen slid up, covering the window completely. The world outside, the flashbulbs, the shouting, the grasping hands, disappeared. I leaned back into the leather seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in 5 years, my mind was quiet. There was no code running in the background of my thoughts, no anxiety about server costs or investor pitches, no mental calculations about how to make payroll while maintaining R&D, no agonizing over whether I was wearing the right outfit for Patricia's approval, just the hum of the engine and the vast open road ahead. I was alone in the back of the car, but I didn't feel lonely, not yet. I felt light, untethered, free. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The personal one, the one still connected to my old life. I opened it and began deleting. Wedding planning folder, deleted. Whitmore family group chat, deleted. Photos of Ethan and me from our 2 years together. I paused on one. We were at a summer festival, both of us laughing, ice cream melting in the heat. He'd been kind that day, genuine. We'd watched the sunset and talked about the future, and I'd felt, for just a moment, like maybe I'd found home. I looked at that photo for a long moment, let myself feel the grief of what could have been if he'd been braver, if I'd been more honest, if his family had been different. If. Then I deleted it. I found Ethan's contact, hovered my thumb over his name. One last hesitation. One heartbeat of memory for the man I'd thought he was. Then I pressed delete. The contact vanished. "James," I said, opening my eyes. "Yes, ma'am?" "Take the scenic route back to the city. I want to see the skyline." "You got it." I looked forward through the windshield, watching the road unfold under the headlights. Chicago waited for me, my city, my company, my life. The real one. The one I'd built with my own hands and my own mind. It was finally beginning, and the best part was, I didn't owe a single cent of it to anyone. The days after the dinner blurred together in a symphony of productivity. Dataflow's integration with Axiom was exceeding every projection. My team was thriving. The startup shield was taking shape. We'd already received applications from over 200 founders seeking funding and legal protection. I assumed the Whitmores would retreat into silence, lick their wounds, accept their defeat. I underestimated the audacity of desperate people. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office reviewing the technical literacy exam results for the logistics division. Brandon had scored a 42%, which meant he was gone, when my assistant Rachel knocked on the door. "You need to see this," she said, her face tight. She pulled up a legal filing on the screen. "Brandon Hayes has filed a civil lawsuit against you personally and against Axiom." I scanned the document. Constructive dismissal, workplace harassment, creating a hostile work environment through impossible quotas and malicious reassignment designed to force resignation. He was suing for $5 million in damages. "He's claiming you targeted him because of your personal relationship with his wife's family," Rachel continued. "That the Alaska transfer was retaliatory, not based on performance." I leaned back in my chair. "Of course he is." "There's more." Rachel pulled up Instagram on the screen. "Victoria posted this an hour ago. It's already gone viral." The video was 10 minutes long, titled in a dramatic font, "The Truth About the Tech Bully." Victoria sat in her designer living room wearing no makeup, a calculated move to appear vulnerable. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were red, whether from crying or from rubbing them to look that way, I couldn't tell. "I need to tell you all the truth about Maya Brooks," she began, her voice trembling. "For months, I've stayed silent. I've protected her, but I can't anymore. Not when she's destroying my family." Rachel fast-forwarded through the video, showing me the highlights. Victoria claimed I'd infiltrated their loving family by pretending to be poor, that I'd used them for connections and ruthlessly discarded them once I got my payday, that I was a master manipulator who had gaslit them into thinking I needed help, that I'd broken her brother's heart for sport and was now systematically destroying everyone who'd tried to support me. "She's a predator," Victoria said into the camera, tears streaming down her face. "She pretended to be weak so we'd let our guard down, and the moment she had power, she used it to crush us. This is what happens when you let people into your life who don't come from your world. They smile to your face and destroy you behind your back." The video had 500,000 views. The comments were a mix of support from Victoria's social circle and confusion from tech industry people who knew my actual story. At Society Wife, "This is horrifying. New money has no class. You can't buy breeding." At Tech Founder, "Wait, isn't this the family that called her a gold digger for 2 years? Something's not adding up." At Victoria's Friend, "Tori is the sweetest person I know. Maya clearly manipulated everyone. Classic narcissist behavior." I closed the video, took a breath. "Do you want to respond?" Rachel asked. "Issue a statement? The legal team says—" "No," I said. She blinked. "No?" "A defensive billionaire looks guilty. A benevolent philanthropist looks untouchable." I turned to my computer. "Tell the legal team to prepare for the harassment lawsuit. It'll go nowhere. His performance record is abysmal. But don't respond to the video. Don't acknowledge it. Let her talk." Rachel hesitated. "Are you sure? It's getting a lot of traction in certain circles." "Rachel, what's on my calendar for 2 weeks from now?" She checked her tablet. "The Startup Shield launch event. Main atrium. Press, industry leaders, investors." "Exactly." I smiled. "I'm not going to fight Victoria in the comments section of Instagram. I'm going to let her hang herself." 2 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, I stood backstage at the Dataflow Axiom headquarters atrium, looking out at a crowd of over 300 people. Press, industry leaders, aspiring entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers. The stage was set with a massive screen displaying the Startup Shield logo, a shield interwoven with a circuit board, protective and technological. I was wearing my navy Armani suit, my hair pulled back, my expression calm. But my heart was racing. This wasn't just a product launch. This was a statement. Arthur appeared beside me. Ready? As I'll ever be. They're going to ask about the Whitmore situation, he warned. The Tribune has already submitted questions. So has TechCrunch. I know. He studied my face. You have something planned, don't you? I smiled. I believe in transparency, Arthur. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. The lights dimmed. My cue. I walked onto the stage to applause. Real applause, not the polite golf claps of society functions. These were people who understood what I'd built, who valued innovation over pedigree. I stood at the podium and waited for the room to quiet. Good morning, I said, my voice amplified to fill the cavernous space. For years, I built my company in the shadows. The room was absolutely silent. I didn't fit the profile of what a CEO was supposed to look like. I was told I was too young, too female, too unconventional. I paused. I was told by people very close to me that my ambition was a delusion, that I should focus on being realistic, that I should get a real job, preferably one answering phones. A few knowing chuckles rippled through the crowd. Today, I'm launching the Startup Shield. It's a venture capital fund and legal defense initiative specifically designed for founders who face systemic bias, familial sabotage, and institutional gatekeeping. We're starting with a $50 million endowment. The applause erupted. It was a wave of sound that washed away Victoria's petty accusations. I let it die down, then opened the floor for questions. I knew it was coming. I'd planted the seed myself by mentioning familial sabotage. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune stood up. Middle-aged woman, sharp eyes, recorder in hand. Ms. Brooks, this is certainly a noble initiative. But how do you respond to recent allegations from the Whitmore family? Victoria Whitmore has publicly called you a destroyer of families, claiming you manipulated them and are now using your position to retaliate. What's your response? The room went quiet. This was the drama they really wanted. I kept my expression pleasant, almost serene. I'm glad you asked, I said. I believe transparency is the best disinfectant. I clicked the remote in my hand. Victoria Whitmore claims I used her family, that I was a burden they tried to support. Rather than argue with her interpretation of events, I think it's better to let them speak for themselves. The screen behind me shifted. The Startup Shield logo disappeared, replaced by grainy but high-definition security footage. The timestamp read, 6 months ago. Location, interior of an apartment, my old apartment, the cramped one-bedroom I'd lived in before the acquisition. The date was from when I'd given Ethan a spare key, thinking it was a romantic gesture, thinking we were building trust. On the screen, Ethan and Victoria walked into my living room. I wasn't there. They thought they were alone. The audio was crystal clear. Victoria. God, this place is depressing. It smells like cheap soup. Ethan. It's temporary. Once we're married, she'll move into the estate. We can sublet this dump. Victoria. Don't be stupid, Ethan. Keep the lease. I need a place to store my winter wardrobe. My closet is overflowing. This place is cheaper than a storage unit. Ethan. You want to use my fiancé's apartment as a closet? Victoria. Why not? It's not like she's paying for it. You pay for everything anyway, right? She's just a leech. At least make her useful. Once you control her accounts, we can turn this into proper storage. Just get rid of her ugly furniture. Ethan laughs. Yeah, you're right. I'll talk to her about upgrading her living situation next week. She's so desperate to please me, she'll probably thank me for kicking her out. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the atrium was absolute, heavy, shocked. Then the murmurs began, then the gasps, then the furious whispering. I stood at the podium, my expression unchanged. That, I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade, is the loving family I allegedly destroyed. They plotted to turn my home into a closet because they viewed me as nothing more than an accessory to be managed. I paused, letting the full weight of their words hang in the air. I didn't destroy the Whitmores. I simply stopped letting them use me as storage. I walked off the stage. The room erupted. The video went viral within minutes. Not hours. Minutes. By noon, it had been shared across every social media platform. Twitter exploded. Reddit dissected every frame. TikTok creators made reaction videos. The hashtag storage unit trended globally, a mocking tribute to Victoria's entitlement. By 2 p.m., Victoria had deleted all her social media accounts. Every single one. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, gone. Her website, the one where she'd positioned herself as a lifestyle influencer, returned a 404 error. The boutique brands she'd partnered with, the organic skincare line, the sustainable fashion label, the luxury travel company, all dropped her before sunset. Their PR teams released identical statements. "We don't align with these values." She wasn't just embarrassed, she was a pariah. The old money set she desperately tried to impress could forgive cruelty. They could forgive manipulation. They could even forgive embezzlement if you were discreet about it. But they couldn't forgive being caught on tape looking trashy. Brandon dropped his lawsuit the next day. His lawyer, probably after watching the video and realizing they had zero chance, advised him that continuing a legal battle against a woman who had video evidence of the family's conspiracy would be financial and reputational suicide. Brandon remained in Chicago just long enough to clean out his desk. Then he and Victoria quietly moved to Arizona, where his family had a vacation property, far from Chicago, far from the people who'd witnessed their humiliation. And Ethan, the law firm where he worked, Whitmore and Associates, ironically named though no relation, valued discretion above all else. They'd built their reputation on representing high-net-worth clients who demanded privacy. A viral video of one of their associates conspiring to financially abuse and manipulate his fiancé was not the kind of publicity they wanted. I heard through the grapevine, Rachel had a friend who worked there, that Ethan was called into a partner meeting on Friday afternoon. 30 minutes later, security escorted him out of the building. He carried a single cardboard box containing his nameplate, a photo of his parents, and a coffee mug. It was a poetic parallel to the fate he'd planned for me. The one where I'd be the struggling partner, grateful for whatever scraps he threw my way. The symmetry was almost beautiful. A month after the press conference, I stood in my office on the 80th floor, past 9 in the evening. The building was mostly empty except for the security staff and a few workaholics scattered across the upper floors. My team, Alex, Rachel, and the engineers who'd stuck with me through the garage days, were gathered in the glass-walled conference room next door. They were debating code structures and eating pizza, their laughter occasionally drifting through my open door. This was my reality. No pretension, no gold-rimmed plates, no passive-aggressive comments about my outfit. Just brilliance and hard work and people who valued ideas over lineage. I should have been happy. I walked to the window and looked out at Chicago. The city sprawled beneath me, a grid of amber and white lights, each one representing a life. A story, a dream. Lake Michigan stretched to the east, dark and infinite. I felt a profound sense of peace. But underneath it, something else. Something I'd been ignoring for weeks. Loneliness. I was 30 years old. I'd just sold my company for $180 million. I was the chief strategy officer of a Fortune 500 company. I was launching initiatives that would change thousands of lives. And I was completely, utterly alone. I hadn't been on a date since Ethan, hadn't even considered it. The thought of letting someone in again, of being vulnerable, of risking that kind of betrayal, it made my chest tight. Maybe I'd always be alone now. Maybe that was the price of never being fooled again. Maybe you couldn't have both, love and self-protection, trust and safety. Maybe I'd sacrificed one for the other, and I'd only just realized it. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting Alex or Rachel. Instead, it was an unknown number, but the message made it clear who it was. I saw the news about the startup shield. "It's amazing, Maya. I'm watching everything you do. I'm so sorry. I regret everything, losing you, not fighting for you, all of it. I regret it every single second. Can we please just meet for coffee? 10 minutes? I just want to apologize to your face. I need you to know I loved you. I still love you. Please. Ethan. I stared at the message. He regretted it. Of course he did. He regretted the loss of status, the loss of money, the lost opportunity. He regretted being a joke in Chicago legal circles while I was a titan of industry. But he didn't regret hurting me. He regretted the consequences of hurting me. There was a difference. A year ago, I would have responded, would have felt that familiar pull, the desire to comfort, to fix, to give one more chance. But tonight, looking at that message, I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just nothing. I had already won. Responding would only acknowledge that he still existed in my world. Maya, Alex called from the conference room. We're ready to sign off on the Tokyo integration. We just need your authorization. I looked up at my team. They were smiling, waiting for me. That was my future. Not some man who'd loved the idea of me, but never the reality. I didn't reply to Ethan's message. Instead, I went into my phone settings and did something final. I changed my number entirely. The network bars cycled, disconnected for a brief, vertiginous moment, then reconnected with a fresh, clean signal. Ethan's message disappeared into the digital void, along with the last thread connecting me to the life I used to tolerate. I walked back to the conference room and picked up the stylus. Let's launch this thing, I said. I signed my name on the interface. Maya Brooks. The screen flashed green. The upload began. I tossed my phone onto the couch and didn't look back. Spring came to Chicago like a promise kept. The ice melted, the trees budded, the city shook off winter and remembered how to breathe. I stood in my penthouse on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint Lake Michigan in shades of gold and pink. It had been 6 months since everything imploded. 6 months since I'd walked away from the Whitmores. 6 months since I'd changed my number and cut the last tie to my old life. Dataflow's integration with Axiom had exceeded every projection. Revenue was up 340%. The company's stock had soared. I'd made my investors obscenely wealthy, my employees comfortable, and myself, well. The startup shield had funded 47 companies. 62% were founded by women or minorities. 3 had already hit unicorn status. We weren't just giving money. We were providing legal protection, therapy, community. I'd built the safety net I'd needed when I was scared and alone. But I was still alone. Not in the office. At work, I was surrounded by brilliant people who challenged me, respected me, valued me. But in moments like this, Sunday mornings, holidays, late nights when the work was done, I felt the absence of someone to share it with. I'd been on a few dates. Brilliant men, successful men, men who understood my world, but every time one of them got too close, every time the conversation turned too personal, I felt the walls go up. I'd trusted Ethan. I'd loved him, and he'd proven that love wasn't enough if it wasn't paired with respect. How do you open yourself up again after that? The doorbell rang. I frowned. It was 7 a.m. on a Sunday. My doorman knew better than to let anyone up without calling first. I checked the security camera on my phone. Patricia Whitmore stood in my private elevator lobby holding a small package. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let her stand there until she got tired and left. But curiosity won. I opened the door. She looked older than she had 6 months ago, tired. The expensive clothes and perfect hair couldn't hide it. There were lines around her eyes that I'd never noticed before. I know I have no right to be here, Patricia said immediately. I won't take much of your time. May I come in, please? I considered shutting the door in her face, savoring that small, petty victory. Instead, I stepped aside. 5 minutes. She walked into my penthouse and stopped, looking around at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the minimalist furniture, the view that stretched to the horizon. So this is where you lived, she said quietly, while we mocked you. It wasn't defensive. It was genuine shame. What do you want, Patricia? She turned to face me, clutching the package. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not here to plead for my son, though. Her voice caught. Though he's not doing well, living with us again. He couldn't find work after the video. I didn't come here for sympathy, she continued quickly, seeing my expression. He made his choices. We all did. She looked down at the package. I came to give you something. She held it out. I took it reluctantly. Inside was a photo album, old pictures from 2 years ago. Ethan and me at the coffee shop where we'd met. Christmas morning. Me wearing an ugly sweater and laughing. A summer picnic in Millennium Park, both of us holding ice cream cones, him looking at me like I'd hung the moon. I found these cleaning out Ethan's old room, Patricia said. And looking at them, I realized something I should have seen 2 years ago. She pointed to the picnic photo. You weren't faking your happiness. You really loved him. My throat tightened. I picked up the photo, remembering that day. It had been perfect. Warm sun, terrible hot dogs, a jazz band playing in the background. Ethan had been kind, present, funny. He'd talked about the future like we were building it together. I did love him, I admitted quietly. And we destroyed that. Patricia's voice cracked. Not just your love for him. We destroyed his capacity to love you properly. I raised him to value the wrong things, to see people as commodities, to judge worth by net worth. She sat down on my couch without asking, suddenly looking exhausted. I taught Victoria to marry for money. I taught Ethan to find someone who needed saving so he'd feel important. I taught them that love was transactional. She looked up at me. I'm 70 years old, Maya, and I just realized I've never had a real relationship in my life. Robert and I, we're business partners. We always have been. Her voice broke. I don't know if I've ever actually loved anyone. I stood there holding the photo album, not sure what to say. This wasn't the Patricia I knew, the steel magnolia, the gatekeeper, the woman who'd looked at me like I was dirt on her expensive carpets. This was just a woman, older, tired, filled with regrets she couldn't undo. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Patricia stood, smoothing her skirt. Because you deserved better, and because I want you to know that not loving you wasn't about you. It was about us, our smallness, our fear. She walked toward the door. You were extraordinary, and we couldn't handle it. She paused at the threshold. I won't bother you again, but I wanted you to have those photos. They're proof that your love was real, even if ours wasn't. Patricia. She turned. Thank you for coming, I said, and I meant it. It helps. A little. She nodded, her eyes glistening, and left. I stood alone with the photo album, looking at the young, hopeful version of myself, the Maya who'd believed in happy endings, who'd thought love could conquer class differences and family prejudice. Were there good moments? Yes. Were they real? Some of them. Did I regret what I'd done? No. But for the first time, I allowed myself to grieve. Not for what I'd lost, for what could have been if they'd been different people, if I'd been more honest, if the world was kinder. I put the album in my desk drawer. Didn't destroy it, didn't hide it, just acknowledged it and moved on. My phone rang. Alex. Hey boss, you sitting down? Why? We just got an acquisition offer. Google wants to buy us. $2.4 billion. My breath caught. $2.4 billion? You built something even bigger than you knew, Alex said. What do you want to do? I looked out at Chicago, the city that had almost broken me, the city where I'd rebuilt myself, where I'd learned to value myself when no one else would. Tell them no, I said. What? We're not for sale, not yet. I smiled. I'm not done building. Are you sure? I'm sure. And Alex? I want to start a new initiative, the Second Chance Initiative. Support groups for founders dealing with toxic family dynamics. Not just money, therapy, community, mentorship. My voice strengthened. I don't want anyone to go through what I did alone. I want to turn my pain into their path forward. There was a pause. Then Alex's voice came back, thick with emotion. You're the best boss I've ever had. I'm the boss I needed when I was scared and alone in that storage unit, I said. Now, let's be that for other people. I hung up and opened my laptop, typed an email to my leadership team. New project launch. The Second Chance Initiative. Providing mental health support, legal resources, and community for founders recovering from toxic family dynamics. Let's build the support system I wish I'd had. I hit send. Then I walked to the window one more time. The spring sun was fully risen now, turning the lake into liquid gold. I was alone, yes, but not lonely. Not anymore. Some people marry for love, some for money, some for security. I'd chosen to marry my purpose, and it would never betray me. There would be time for love again someday, when I was ready, when I found someone who saw all of me, not just the parts that made them feel good about themselves. But today I had work to do, companies to fund, founders to protect, lives to change. I picked up my coffee and raised it to the city. "Thank you," I whispered, "for teaching me the difference between being alone and being lonely, between being loved and being valued, between settling and soaring." My phone buzzed with responses from my team, excited messages about the new initiative, ideas for implementation, offers to help. These were my people. This was my family, not by blood, but by choice, by shared values, by mutual respect. And that, I was learning, was worth more than any emerald necklace or society wedding. I smiled and got to work. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't destroying your enemies. It was building something so beautiful they could only watch from outside, noses pressed against the glass, finally understanding what they'd lost.